Hi, I'm Bill Sanders, and this is WatchArtSci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, what I want to do is to talk about ébauches. An ébauche is a French term for the unassembled movement without the escarpment and without the balance, the mainspring, and the hairsprings in a watch's movement. So, in other words, it's most of the things that make your watch be a watch. Now, we're talking about mechanical watches, which means that you have gears and a spring-driven kind of, if you want to call it a motor. We're not dealing with probably one of the most common types of movement in watches, which is the quartz system. So they're quartz ébauches. There's not quite the range of difference. They're pretty good. I mean, in fact, they're very good in terms of keeping accurate time compared to mechanical movements. And so in order for mechanical movements to keep the time anywhere near the quality of time you get in terms of timekeeping that the quartz has, you have to have very high standards and extremely good ébauches. All right, so we're going to start now. The first thing I want to talk about is what goes into an ébauche that is considered to be of the level of high horology. And we're going to take a look at the finishing process. Now, there's a process for making the ébauches and the general movement of a watch. And then there's the final process is the finishing process. And in the finishing process this is where you can fine-tune the accuracy and everything about the watch so it lasts a long time, it doesn't corrode or rust or anything else like that. And the high horology involves the quality of every aspect of making the ébauche, including the finishing. Okay, so let's see what's involved in finishing. First of all, you have the drawing, which is getting the burrs and the machine parts off of a watch. The next step is called beveling, and beveling is where, like on the bridges and different parts of the watches, you take off the sharp edges. And what this does, it helps prevent corrosion, but it also looks a lot nicer too when you have a beveling in your movement. Third, you have something that's called perlage, or circular graining, and they look like a lot of little the little whirls all over the watch. What they used to be used for is sort of interesting. They would trap dust that would come in the old watches before they had the kind of sealing that you have with waterproof watches today. But they look nice, and so they're an important part. Third, you have something that's called the Côte de Genève, or the Geneva Waves, and these are these lines that also are part of keeping an old-fashioned thing. There are two types. They're circular, and they're the ones that are straight, called Geneva Waves. Next, you have black polish. Black polish was used primarily on screws to help keep them from rusting or corroding or something bad happening to them. The next step is called brûlage, and it's removing the residue and burrs of the inside parts that you can't see. This is the part that hasn't been taken care of with the other aspects of the movement. Now, the final step, and to me this is really one of the most important, it's called dressage, and it's true up or straightening out all of the parts that go together. In other words, you want to be sure they're meshed just right, because if a gear is not quite meshed with a gear that it turns, it's not going to be as accurate, and it's more likely to fail at some point. So this is the finishing process, and it really differentiates your high horology watches from your average Joe watches. It's sort of like comparing somebody who's driving a Rolls Royce with somebody who's driving a a Volkswagen or a Toyota or Honda or Ford or Chevy, they're different levels, and the levels that we're talking about are in high horology. Now, where do Ébauches come from? Okay, well, there are certain groups that are Ébauche makers. One of the most famous is called ETA, and ETA is owned by the Swatch Group. Now, up until very recently, most of the Ébauches and even the watches that were considered to be luxury watches were made by ETA. For example, this is a watch by Raymond Weil, and it has an ETA Ébauche in it. And if you look at it, it's it's a functional automatic watch. It works fine, uh, and but it's really not considered high horology, and I don't think Raymond Weil ever will be, mainly because they are always dependent on somebody else's Ébauches. Nothing wrong with that, but um, it's it's something you need to know about, because if you're going to pay a lot of money for a watch, uh, you want to be sure that what's inside is worth what you're paying for. Now, on the other hand, sort of at the other extreme, you have watches that cost a lot of money. This is a Patek Philippe Calatrava, and this has its own Ébauche. It has the seal of Geneva, and so it's considered to be one of the best. And its Ébauche that it has is made by Patek Philippe. Now, this isn't to say that some of your top watchmakers have not had Ébauches made by somebody else. They do, but they're usually made by a company that's at near the same level. For example, Jaeger-LeCoultre has made a lot of Ébauches for Vacheron Constantin, Audemars Piguet, and even Patek Philippe. So while most of the time, when you buy a true high horology a watch, you're getting the Ébauche that is made by the company that made it. But sometimes that's not true. Let me give you an example. I'm wearing one right now. This is Ébauche that started off as a Girard-Perregaux 3100. However, Vacheron Constantin worked on it and fixed it up. In fact, they actually made it better than Girard-Perregaux. There were some problems, and Vacheron fixed it before Girard-Perregaux did. They added some elements to it that made it not only work better, but it even looked better. But still, Girard-Perregaux was no stamp them out Ébauche maker. They were and are a good company. Same thing with Frederic Piguet, which was another company that has made Ébauches at a very high level. So while we expect your top companies to make their own Ébauches, a lot of times they use others from other top companies. Now, something very interesting has been going on. A number of years ago, not too long ago, ETA said, well, we're not going to be selling Ébauches to every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants it. In fact, we're just going to sell them to watches made within the context of the Swatch Group. Well, the Swatch Group is a pretty good-sized group of watches, but the majority of watches are outside of it, especially when you're talking about high horology. And the other thing was that a lot of the watches, for example, a lot of Cartier watches have a ETA Ébauche. Same thing with IWC, Tag Heuer, you name it. A lot of them have these Ébauches in it. Okay, so that's going to change the picture considerably. Now, there's two different routes they can go. The Raymond Weil just found another Ébauche maker. I think it's called Stella. And they'll keep making watches, but they will not they've decided not to go ahead and make Ébauches along with it. On the other hand, Tag Heuer took a really dramatic step and put in a whole new movement making system in one of their factories in Switzerland. And they used the most modern methods. They used robotics and just really did some amazing things. And the first one they came out with, they had a couple problems with some of the early Ébauches. Then they came out with a tourbillon, which was like the height of high horology. So I guess they certainly gave up their dependence on ETA. And other companies are a lot of them are faced with the same issue. Either start making your own Ébauches or find another source, because ETA, after I think it's 2020, you're not going to be able to get them from them anymore. So I know that Cartier also came out with a very interesting calibre de Cartier, which is all made in-house at Cartier. So other companies like Vacheron Constantin, they've been making most of their Ébauches historically. There was a period there where they had to get them from other sources. But now I think 70% of all Vacheron Constantin watches carry the Geneva seal, which means that they had to make them themselves. And they still have a few that are made by other high-end watchmakers. And then, of course, they have some quartz watches too. A lot of ladies' watches have a quartz movement in it. Now, this is true with everything, Rolex, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, all of them have, usually in the smaller ones, in the smaller watches, they'll use the quartz movement, because you can get the same accuracy, better accuracy in a small place with that. Okay, now what about, there's one last thing I'm going to talk about. This is sort of like taking a Chevy engine and fixing it up and making the thing run like a Rolls Royce. Sort of hot rodding, I guess. There's this one really interesting company called Harbouring 2. It's located in Austria. The founder of the company used to work for IWC and A. Lang & Son. So the guy's really extremely good. And he's taken ETA Ébauches and brought them up to the level of high horology. Now, more recently, especially since ETA said we're not going to sell them to anybody anymore except those in the Swatch Group, they come out with their own Ébauche, and the thing is amazing. So we're at a period right now where you're going to see a lot of changes, and in my opinion, there are changes for the better, because people are going to be, these high-end watch companies are going to be making their own high-end Ébauches. So that's it for getting started on Ébauches today, and this has been WatchArtSci, and you can click our subscribe button whenever you feel like it. That's all for today. One last thing before we go. This is supposed to be very interactive. Tell us about your Ébauche, or have a question about it, or what your opinion on Ébauches are. Let us know, and I will definitely respond. Take care.